Father abandons his baby on a deserted road, but what the wolf did next will change everything. The bitter cold of the Arizona night cut through the air like a knife, its icy fingers reaching out to touch everything in its path. On a lonely stretch of road just outside Flagstaff, a car's headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the barren landscape. The vehicle came to an abrupt stop, and a figure emerged clutching a small bundle close to his chest. With trembling hands, the man placed the bundle on the ground, his breath visible in the frigid air as he stepped back towards the car. A soft cry emanated from the bundle, a baby no more than a few months old, left alone in the unforgiving night. The man hesitated for a moment, his hand on the car door, but then, as if steeling himself against some unseen force, he climbed in and drove away, leaving the infant alone on the deserted road. Little Ethan, for that was the baby's name. Welcome back to ZF Story Life. Today, we have a real story that's bound to inspire you and make you see life in a whole new way. This isn't just any story, it's a journey filled with challenges, triumphs, and life lessons that you won't want to miss. If you love real stories that push you to grow, learn, and find strength, then make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Now, let's dive into this incredible real-life story on ZF Story Life. Began to wail, his cries echoing in the vast emptiness around him. The cold seeped into his tiny body, and his cries grew weaker with each passing moment. Just when all hope seemed lost, a shadow moved in the nearby forest. Golden eyes gleamed in the moonlight as a majestic wolf emerged from the trees. The creature padded silently towards the crying infant, its powerful form a stark contrast to the helpless child. But instead of harm, the wolf offered protection. Gently it curled its body around Ethan, shielding him from the biting cold. The baby's cries subsided as he nestled into the wolf's warm fur, finding comfort in this unlikely guardian. With great care, the wolf maneuvered Ethan onto its back, securing him with gentle movements. Then, with a purposeful stride, it began to make its way through the dense forest, carrying its precious cargo to safety. As they traveled through the night, the forest seemed to come alive around them. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting ethereal shadows on the forest floor. Owls hooted softly, and the rustle of small creatures could be heard in the underbrush. Yet the wolf moved on, undeterred, its mission clear. Ethan, lulled by the rhythmic movement and the warmth of his protector, drifted into a peaceful sleep. For the first time since being abandoned, he felt safe, unaware of the extraordinary journey he was undertaking. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, the wolf and its young charge emerged from the forest. Into a small clearing at the center stood a quaint log cabin, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. The wolf paused at the edge of the trees, its golden eyes fixed on the cabin inside. Michael and Sarah Sterling were just beginning their day. The couple had moved to this secluded spot a year ago, seeking solace and healing after years of failed attempts to start a family. Little did they know that their lives were about to change forever. Sarah was the first to notice movement outside Michael. She called, her voice tinged with curiosity and a hint of fear. There's something out there. Michael joined her at the window, his eyes widening as he took in the scene before him. Is that a wolf? He whispered. And is it carrying something? As they watched, the wolf gently lowered Ethan to the ground and him towards the cabin with its nose. Then, with one last look at the baby, the magnificent creature turned and disappeared back into the forest, its mission complete. For a moment, Michael and Sarah stood frozen, unable to believe their eyes. Then, as if snapping out of a trance, they rushed outside. Sarah reached Ethan first, scooping him up into her arms with a mixture of shock and instinctive tenderness. It's a baby, she breathed, her voice filled with wonder. Michael, it's a baby boy. Michael wrapped his arms around them, both, his mind racing. How did he get here? Where did he come from? As if in answer, a wolf's howl echoed through the forest, a haunting sound that sent shivers down their spines. They looked at each other, then down at the baby in Sarah's arms. Ethan gazed back at them with wide, trusting eyes. In that moment, something shifted in the universe. Michael and Sarah, who had longed for a child for so long, found themselves face to face with a miracle, and Ethan, abandoned and alone, had found his way to a home filled with love. Little did they know that this was just the beginning of an extraordinary tale, one filled with love, mystery, and a destiny that would unfold in ways they could never have imagined. Chapter 2: A new beginning. The days that followed Ethan's miraculous arrival were a whirlwind of activity and emotion for Michael and Sarah. They quickly fell into the rhythm of caring for a baby, their hearts swelling with love for the little boy who had so unexpectedly entered their lives. Sarah, a former nurse, tended to Ethan with gentle expertise, marveling at his resilience. "It's a miracle he survived that night," she often said, cradling him close. Michael, a forest ranger, found himself constantly scanning the tree line, half expecting to see the wolf that had brought Ethan to them. "I've never seen anything like it," he would murmur, shaking his head in wonder. As the days turned into weeks, they made the decision to keep Ethan. The authorities had been notified, but with no reports of missing infants and no way to trace Ethan's origins, Michael and Sarah were granted temporary custody. "So I will give him the best life we can," Michael promised, watching Sarah rock Ethan to sleep one evening. "Whatever his past, his future is with us now." But even as they embraced their new role as parents, questions lingered. Who had abandoned Ethan that night, and why had the wolf, a creature usually feared, acted as his protector? These questions faded into the background as they focused on the joy of raising Ethan. The cabin, once a retreat from their pain, now echoed with laughter and the pitter-patter of tiny feet. Sarah, delighted in introducing Ethan to the world around them, she would take him on walks through the forest, pointing out birds and flowers, her voice soft with wonder. "Look, Ethan," she would say, "isn't it beautiful? This is your home now." Michael, for his part, found a new purpose in fatherhood. He built a sturdy crib for Ethan, carved wooden toys, and spent hours reading to the boy, determined to give him every advantage. As Ethan grew, he thrived under their care. His first smile, his first word, his first steps, each milestone was celebrated with unbridled joy. Yet there were moments when a shadow seemed to pass over his face, a look of something deeper than his young years should allow. "Do you think he remembers?" Sarah asked one night after putting Ethan to bed that night. "I mean," Michael pulled her close, his brow furrowed. "I don't know, but whatever happened before, we're his family now. We'll make sure he always feels loved and safe." What they didn't know was that Ethan's connection to that fateful night ran deeper than they could imagine. As he slept, his dreams were often filled with flashes of golden eyes watching over him, keeping him safe. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, a lone wolf's howl would echo through the forest. Each time Ethan would stir in his sleep, a small smile playing on his lips, as if recognizing the call of an old friend. As the years passed, Ethan grew into a curious and adventurous boy. He loved exploring the forest with Michael, learning about the plants and animals that called it home. But he was always drawn to the wolves, his eyes lighting up at any mention of them. "Tell me about the night you found me," he would often ask. Snuggled between Michael and Sarah on the porch swing, they would recount the tale, still marveling at the mystery of it all. Ethan listened with rapt attention, each time his young mind trying to piece together a puzzle he didn't fully understand. He felt a connection to the forest and its creatures, especially the wolves, that he couldn't explain. On his 5th birthday, as Michael and Sarah tucked him into bed, Ethan made a wish. "I want to meet the wolf that saved me," he whispered, his eyes shining with hope. Michael and Sarah exchanged a glance, a mixture of love and concern in their eyes. They knew that Ethan's origins would always be a part of him, a mystery waiting to be solved. Little did they know that fate was already in motion, setting the stage for revelations that would shake their world to its core. The peaceful life they had built was about to be tested as the secrets of the past came knocking at their door. As Ethan drifted off to sleep that night, a wolf's howl echoed in the distance, and somewhere in the forest, golden eyes gleamed in the moonlight, watchful and waiting. Chapter 3: Shadows in the forest. The years rolled by, and Ethan blossomed into a bright, inquisitive 10-year-old. His bond with Michael and Sarah grew stronger with each passing day, yet the mystery of his origins remained an unspoken undercurrent in their lives. It was a crisp autumn morning when the first signs of change appeared. Michael, out on his usual patrol of the forest, not noticed unfamiliar tire tracks cutting through a rarely used path. His ranger instincts on high alert, he followed the trail only to find it disappearing at the edge of a clearing. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Michael shared his discovery with Sarah. "It's probably nothing," he said, trying to sound nonchalant, "maybe just some lost tourists." But Sarah knew her husband too well. She saw the worry lines etched on his forehead, the way his eyes dark started to Ethan, who was happily oblivious, chattering about his day at school. "We'll keep an eye out," Sarah whispered, squeezing Michael's hand under the table. "Everything will be fine." But the peace they had cultivated for a decade was about to be shattered. A few days later, Ethan was playing at the edge of the forest, his favorite spot where the trees met their backyard. As he climbed his usual oak tree, he froze. In the distance he saw movement, not the familiar rustle of forest animals, but the purposeful stride of men. Heart pounding, Ethan scrambled down the tree and ran back to the house. "Dad," he called out, breathless, "there are people in the forest." Michael's face paled. He grabbed his ranger jacket and radio. "Stay inside with your mother," he instructed, his voice tight with concern. Sarah pulled Ethan close, her arms protective around him. They watched from the window as Michael disappeared into the trees. Hours passed, the tension in the house growing with each tick of the clock. When Michael finally returned, his face was grim. "There were 3 men," he reported, running a hand through his hair. "They claimed to be hikers who got lost, but something felt off. They were too interested in the area, asking strange questions." Sarah's grip on Ethan tightened. "To ask what kind of questions?" Michael hesitated, his eyes flicking to Ethan. "They were asking if we'd seen any unusual animal activity, specifically about wolves." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She knew, as did Michael, that wolves were rare in this part of Arizona. The only wolf they had ever encountered was the one that had brought Ethan to them all those years ago. Ethan, picking up on the tension, looked between his parents. "Is this about me?" he asked, his voice small. Michael knelt down, placing his hands on Ethan's shoulders. "We don't know, buddy, but I promise you we're going to figure this out. You're safe with us." That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Michael and Sarah sat at the kitchen table, speaking in hushed tones. "We need to be prepared," Michael said, his voice heavy with worry. "If these men are looking for Ethan," Sarah nodded, her face set with determination, "we'll protect him. He's our son, no matter what." As they spoke, neither noticed the pair of golden eyes watching from the forest's edge, alert and wary. The next few weeks passed in a state of heightened alertness. Michael increased his patrols and Sarah kept Ethan closer to home, but despite their precautions, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Ethan, sensitive to the change in atmosphere, began having vivid dreams. Night after night, he found himself running through the forest, guided by a majestic estic wolf with golden eyes. Each time he woke, the dreams faded, leaving him with a sense of both comfort and urgency. One evening, as the family sat on the porch watching the sunset, a twig snapped in the nearby bushes. Michael was on his feet in an instant, positioning himself in front of Sarah and Ethan. From the shadows emerged a figure, not one of the mysterious men, but a woman. Her silver hair gleamed in the fading light, and her eyes, a striking amber color, seemed to glow with an inner fire. "Hello," she said, her voice carrying a hint of an accent they couldn't place. "I believe it's time we talked." Michael and Sarah exchanged a look of confusion and apprehension, but Ethan, his eyes wide with recognition, whispered a single word that would change everything. "Grandmother." The woman smiled, her gaze fixed on Ethan. "Yes, little one, I've come to tell you about your heritage, about the wolf that essay saved you, and about the power that runs through your veins." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, the Sterling family stood on the precipice of a revelation that would shake the very foundations of their world. The truth about Ethan's past was finally emerging from the shadows, bringing with it a destiny none of them could have imagined. Chapter 4: Revelations in Moonlight. The revelation of the mysterious woman's identity sent shock wave through the Sterling household. Michael and Sarah stood frozen there, minds reeling as they tried to process this unexpected turn of events. Ethan, however, seemed drawn to the woman, his eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Please, Sarah finally managed, her voice trembling slightly. Come inside. We have a lot to discuss. As they settled in the living room, the woman who introduced herself as Elena began to unravel a tale that seemed more suited to ancient legends than their quiet life in the Arizona forest. Ethan, Elena began, her amber eyes fixed on the boy. You come from a long line of shapeshifters, people with the ability to transform into wolves. Your father, my son, was one of the most powerful in generations. Michael and Sarah exchanged disbelieving glances, but Ethan leaned forward, captivated. Is that why I dream of wolves? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena nodded, a sad smile playing on her lips. Your connection to the wolf spirit is strong, little one. It's been calling to you all these years. As the night wore on, Elena wove a tale of an ancient clan living in secret among humans, protecting the balance of nature. She spoke of Ethan's father, a man named Lucas, who had fallen in love with a human woman, Ethan's mother. But there are those in our clan who believe that mixing with humans dilutes our power. Elena explained, her voice heavy with sorrow. They saw Ethan as a threat, a potential weakening of our bloodline. Sarah gasped, pulling Ethan close. Is that why he was abandoned? Elena nodded grimly. Lucas and Ethan's mother were trying to protect him. They planned to leave the clan to raise Ethan away from the politics and danger, but they would discovered. Tears glistened in Elena's eyes as she recounted how Lucas had made the heartbreaking decision to leave Ethan where he might be found by kind strangers hoping to throw off their pursuers. The wolf that brought Ethan to you, she said, looking at Michael and Sarah with gratitude, was Lucas. He used the last of his strength to ensure his son's safety before leading the hunters away. The room fell silent as the weight of this revelation settled over them. Ethan, his young mind struggling to comprehend the enormity of what he was hearing, asked in a small voice, what happened to them? To my birth parents. Elena's face clouded with grief. We don't know for certain. They disappeared that night. Some believe they're still out there hiding, others. She trailed off, unable to voice the alternative. Chapter for Revelations in Moonlight continued. Michael's question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Elena's expression darkened as she nodded slowly. Yes, she confirmed, her voice low. There are factions within our clan who never gave up the search for Ethan. They believe that his unique heritage, half shape shifter, half human, could either be the key to strengthening our bloodline or a threat that needs to be eliminated. Sarah tightened her grip on Ethan, her protective instincts flaring. We won't let them take him, she declared, her voice fierce with maternal determination. Elena smiled sadly at Sarah's devotion. Your love for Ethan is evident, and I'm grateful he found such caring parents. But the danger he faces is beyond anything you can imagine. Ethan, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke up. Can I turn into a wolf too? His eyes sparkled with a mix of fear and excitement at the possibility. Elena turned to him, her expression softening. The ability usually manifests during puberty, but given your unique heritage, it's hard to say for certain. Your powers may be different, possibly even stronger than a full-blooded shape shifter. Michael ran a hand through his hair, struggling to come to terms with this new reality. So what do we do now? How do we protect Ethan? Ella stood up, her posture straightening as if coming to a decision. I've watched over Ethan from afar all these years, but I can no longer stand by. It's time he learned about his heritage, about the powers that lie dormant within him. She knelt in front of Ethan, taking his small hands in hers. If you're willing, I can teach you about our ways, help you understand and control your abilities as they emerge, but the choice must be yours, little one. Ethan looked from Elena to Michael and Sarah, his young face etched with a maturity beyond his years. I want to learn, he said softly, but I don't want to leave Mom and Dad. Elena smiled, relief evident in her features. You won't have to. Your parents' love and support will be crucial in the challenges that lie ahead. If they're willing, we can begin your training right here. Michael and Sarah exchanged a long look, years of unspoken communication passing between them in an instant. Finally, they nodded in unison. "We're in this together," Michael declared, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Whatever it takes to keep our son safe." As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, a new chapter in their lives was beginning. The quiet life they had known was forever changed, but the bonds of love that held their family together were stronger than ever. Elena stood, moving towards the door. "I'll return tomorrow at sunset. We have much to prepare." She paused, turning back to face them. "Thank you for loving him so completely. In your care, Ethan has grown into a remarkable young man." As she slipped out into the fading night, the Sterlings huddled together on the couch, each lost in their own thoughts about the extraordinary revelations and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Ethan, nestled between his parents, felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. He gazed out the window at the forest. He had always loved seeing it, now with new eyes. Somewhere in those trees, as Bertha had run as a wolf, sacrificing everything to keep him safe. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Ethan made a silent vow. He would learn about his heritage, master his abilities, and one day he would uncover the truth about what happened to Lucas and Anna. But most of all, he would do whatever it took to protect the family that had chosen him, loved him, and raised him as their own. Little did they know this was just the beginning of an adventure that would test their bonds, challenge their beliefs, and ultimately reveal the true power of love and family in the face of extraordinary circumstances. Chapter 5: The Awakening. The weeks following Elena's revelation were a whirlwind of activity and emotion for the Sterling family. True to her word, Elena returned each evening, bringing with her ancient texts, mysterious artifacts, and a wealth of knowledge about the Shapeshifter clan and their history. Ethan threw himself into his lessons with enthusiasm, soaking up every bit of information about his heritage. He learned about the clan's connection to nature, their role as protectors of the forest, and the complex politics that had led to his parents' flight. Michael and Sarah, determined to support Ethan in every way possible, participated in the lessons as well. They marveled at the depth of the shifter culture and the beauty of their traditions, even as they grappled with the reality of the danger that lurked in the shadows. As autumn gave way to winter, Ethan's training intensified. Elena taught him meditation techniques to connect with his inner wolf, and exercises to hone his senses, which were already becoming sharper than those of an ordinary human. One crisp December evening, as the full moon hung low in the sky, Ethan sat cross-legged in a small sea, clearing his eyes, closed in deep concentration. Elena circled him slowly, her voice low and hypnotic as she guided him through a visualization exercise. "Feel the energy of the forest around you, Ethan," she intoned. "Listen to the whisper of the wind through the trees, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. Let the moonlight seep into your skin, awakening the wolf within." Suddenly, Ethan's eyes snapped open, glowing with an otherworldly amber light. A gasp escaped Sarah's lips as she watched from the edge of the clearing. Michael's arm wrapped protectively around her waist. Ethan's body began to shimmer as if seen through a heat haze. For a moment, the outline of a wolf seemed to superimpose itself over his human form. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vision faded, leaving Ethan panting and wide-eyed on the forest floor. What happened?" he gasped, looking to Elena for explanation. Elena knelt beside him, her face alight with pride and excitement. "You touched your wolf spirit for the first time, little one. Your transformation may be closer than we thought." As the winter deepened, Ethan's abilities continued to grow. His senses became razor sharp, allowing him to hear conversations from impossible distances and track scents like a blood hound. His strength and speed increased exponentially, much to Michael's amazement and slight concern. But with these new abilities came new challenges. Ethan struggled to control his heightened emotions, often finding himself overwhelmed by the intensity of his feelings. There were days when the call of the wild was so strong that it Took all of his willpower not to run into the forest and never look back. Through it all, Michael and Sarah remained his anchor, their love and support unwavering. They adapted to their new reality with remarkable resilience, turning their home into a sanctuary where Ethan could safely explore his emerging powers. Elena too became an integral part of their lives. Her initially aloof demeanor softened as she spent more time with the family, and she found herself growing increasingly attached to the grandson she had watched from afar for so long. As spring approached, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings, Ethan's training reached a critical juncture. Elena believed he was nearly ready for his first full transformation, a milestone that filled the entire family with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. But even as they prepared for this monumental event, none of them could shake the feeling that they were racing against time. The men who had been spotted in the forest months ago hadn't been seen since, but Elena warned that their absence didn't mean the threat had passed. "They're out there," she cautioned one evening, her eyes scanning the tree line warily, "and they're getting closer. We must be ready." As if in response to her words, a wolf's howl echoed through the night, closer than any they had heard before. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes flashing amber for a moment as something deep within him responded to the call. Michael and Sarah exchanged worried glances. They knew that the peaceful life they had built was balanced on a knife's edge. Soon, very soon, they would face a challenge that would test the strength of their family and the limits of Ethan's newfound abilities. As the howl faded into the night, Ethan stood, his young face set with determination. "I'm ready," he declared, looking from Elena to his parents. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Little did they know that fate had one more surprise in store, a revelation that would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew and set in motion a chain of events that would change their lives forever. Chapter 6: Echoes of the Past. As spring blossomed in the Arizona forest, bringing with it a riot of color and new life, the Sterling family found themselves on edge. The peaceful routine they had established over the winter was now tinged with an undercurrent of anticipation and worry. Ethan's training had reached a fever pitch under Elena's guidance. He had made remarkable progress, his control over his abilities growing stronger by the day. Yet the final hurdle, his first full transformation, remained elusive. "Don't push yourself too hard," Sarah cautioned one afternoon. Michael burst from the trees, his ranger uniform disheveled, his face pale with shock. "You need to see this," he gasped, beckoning them to follow. Deep in the heart of the forest, in a clearing they had never noticed before, stood an ancient gnarled oak tree. Its massive trunk was split down the middle as if struck by lightning, revealing a hollow core. But it was what lay inside the hollow that had Michael so shaken. There, nestled in the heart of the tree, was a small, leather-bound book and a silver locket. Elena, who had joined them, inhaled sharply at the sight. "It can't be," she whispered, reaching out with trembling hands to touch the items. "What is it?" Ethan asked, his voice hushed with awe. Elena turned to them, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "This book, it's your father's journal, and the locket belonged to your mother." A hush fell over the clearing as the implications of this discovery sank in. Michael was the first to break the silence. "But how, after all this time?" Elena shook her head, wonder evident in her voice. "Lucas must have hidden them here before that night. He always said the forest would protect what was most precious." With reverent care she lifted the journal and locket from their resting place. "Ethan," she said softly, "these belong to you now. They may hold answers to questions we've long wondered about." That night, gathered around the fireplace in the Sterlings' cozy living room, Ethan opened the journal with trembling hands. As he began to read, his father's words seemed to come alive, filling the room with echoes of the past. "My dearest son," the first entry began, "if you're reading this, then our worst fears have come to pass. Your mother and I are no longer with you, but know that our love for you is eternal." Tears flowed freely as Ethan read on, learning of his parents' love story, their dreams for his future, and the difficult choice they made to protect him. The journal detailed the growing tensions within the clan, the discovery of Anna's pregnancy, and the ultimate decision to flee. but it was the final entry that caused Ethan to gasp. Aloud, we've discovered something extraordinary. Lucas had written a prophecy hidden for generations speaks of a child born of two worlds, human and shapeshifter. This child, it is said, will have the power to bridge the divide between our kind and humans, ushering in a new era of peace and understanding. Elena leaned forward, her eyes wide. The hybrid child, she breathed. It's you, Ethan, you're the one. The prophecy speaks of the weight of this revelation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Ethan looked from the journal to the faces of his family, Michael and Sarah, who had raised him with unwavering love, and Elena, who had risked everything to protect him and teach him about his heritage. But what does it mean, he asked, his young voice filled with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Elena's face grew serious. It means that your role in the future of our kind is even more crucial than we realized, and it means that those who seek to harm you will stop at nothing to prevent the prophecy from coming true. As if in response to her words, a distant howl echoed through the night. Closer than ever before, Michael moved to the window, his body tense. They're coming, he said grimly, and I don't think they're alone. Sarah pulled Ethan close, her voice fierce with maternal protection. Let them come. Ready. Ethan stood, the journal clutched to his chest, the silver locket now hanging around his neck. He felt a surge of something powerful within him, not just the stirring of his wolf spirit, but a deep connection to the parents he had never known and the destiny that awaited him. No, he said, his voice steady and sure. We're not just ready, we're going to change everything. As the howls grew closer, heralding the approach of friends and foes alike, the Sterling family stood united. The final confrontation was at hand, and with it, the chance to fulfill a prophecy centuries in the making. Little did they know that the greatest challenge and the most astonishing revelation was yet to come. Chapter 7. The gathering storm. The forest thrummed with an electric energy as night fell, the air thick with anticipation. The Sterling family, along with Elena, had spent the day in frantic preparation, knowing that the confrontation they had long feared was now inevitable. Ethan stood on the porch, his eyes scanning the tree line, the journal and locket, reminders of the legacy he carried. Despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm him, he felt a strange calm settling over him, as if the spirits of his birth parents were watching over him. They're here, he said softly, his heightened senses picking up the sound of approaching footsteps. Long before the others could hear them, from the shadows of the forest emerged a group of figures, some in human form, others as massive imposing wolves. At their head was a man whose very presence seemed to command respect and fear in equal measure. Elena stepped forward, her posture rigid. Brother, she said, her voice cold, I had hoped it wouldn't come to this. The man's laugh was without humor. Did you really think you could hide him forever? Elena, the boy belongs with his own kind. Michael moved protectively in front of Ethan, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. San is exactly where he belongs, with his family. The leader gaze swept over Michael and Sarah dismissively before settling on Ethan. You've grown strong, nephew, he said, a hint of grudging admiration in his voice. But you have no idea of the power you possess or the danger you represent. Ethan stepped forward, his chin raised defiantly. I know more than you think, Uncle. I know about the prophecy, and I know that you're afraid of what it means. A murmur ran through the assembled shape shifters at Ethan's words. The leader's eyes narrowed. So you've learned of your supposed destiny, then you must understand why we can't allow it to come to pass. The mixing of our bloodlines with humans will be the death of our kind. You're wrong, Ethan declared, his voice ringing out clear and strong. The prophecy doesn't speak of death, but of unity, of a future where shapeshifters and humans can live together in harmony. As he spoke, something extraordinary began to happen. A soft glow emanated from Ethan's skin, growing brighter with each word. The assembled shapeshifters watched in awe as the light seemed to coals around him, taking on the ethereal form of a wolf. Elena gasped recognition dawning on her face. The spirit wolf, she breathed. It's just like in the ancient legends. The leader took a step back, shock evident on his face. Impossible, he whispered. But Ethan was beyond hearing, his eyes glowed with an inner fire as he continued to speak, his voice seeming to echo with the wisdom of ages. For too long our kinds have been divided by fear and mistrust, but I am living proof that we are stronger together than art. As he spoke, the spectral wolf grew larger, its form shimmering with power. The shape shifters who had come as enemies found themselves kneeling, overcome by the sheer force of Ethan's presence. Michael and Sarah watched in amazement, tears streaming down their faces as they witnessed the true extent of their son's extraordinary nature. Chapter 7. The Gathering Storm continued. Just as it seemed the standoff would end peacefully, a commotion erupted. From the back of the group, a tall, scarred man pushed his way to the front, his eyes blazing with fanatical intensity. Enough of this foolishness, he roared, pulling out a silver dagger that edged ominously in the moonlight. The abomination must be destroyed before he corrupts us all. Time seemed to slow as the man lunged towards Ethan, the dagger aimed at his heart. Michael and Sarah cried out in horror. Elena moved to intercept, but they were too far away. In that moment of crisis, something extraordinary happened. The spectral wolf that surrounded Ethan let out a deafening howl and leaped forward, intercepting the attacker mid-stride. As it made contact, there was a blinding flash of light. When the light faded, everyone stared in stunned silence. Where Ethan had stood was now a magnificent wolf, its fur a shimmering silver that seemed to glow from within. The attacker lay unconscious at its feet, the silver dagger shattered into pieces. Ethan had achieved his first full transformation, and in doing so had tapped into a power beyond anything they had imagined. The leader of the shapeshifters, Ethan's uncle, stepped forward cautiously. It cannot be, he murmured, awe and fear mingling in his voice. The legends speak of this, the silver wolf born once in 1,000 years with the power to unite all packs. Elena nodded, tears of joy and pride streaming down her face. The prophecy wasn't just about bridging the gap between humans and shapeshifters. She realized it was about uniting all of us, different packs, different beliefs, under one banner. As if in response to her words, Ethan began to transform back, the process smooth and effortless. When it was complete, he stood before them, his eyes still glowing with an inner light, the silver locket around his neck pulsing with energy. Uncle Ethan said, his voice carrying a new authority, it's time to end this conflict. We don't have to be enemies. The world is changing, and we must change with it or risk being left behind. The leader looked at Ethan for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. Then slowly, he sank to one knee, bowing his head. The silver wolf has risen, he declared. I pledge my loyalty to you, Ethan. Sterling bridge between worlds. One by one, the other shapeshifters followed suit, kneeling before Ethan in a gesture of respect and allegiance. The clearing was filled with a sense of awe and hope, as if the very air was charged with the promise of a new beginning. Michael and Sarah watched the scene unfold with a mixture of pride and bittersweet realization. Their little boy had grown into something extraordinary, a leader who would shape the future of two worlds. As the night wore on, plans were made and alliances formed. The shape shifters who had come as enemies left as allies, spreading the word of the silver wolf's rise to packs across the country. But even as they celebrated this turning point, Elena pulled Ethan aside, her face serious. This is only the beginning, she warned. There will be those who resist change, who cling to the old ways, and there are other dangers out there beyond the shapeshifter world that we must be prepared to face. Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of his newfound responsibility settling on his young shoulders. I know, he said softly, but I alone have my family, both human and shapeshifter. Together we can face anything. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Ethan stood on the porch of the cabin that had been his sanctuary for so long. Michael and Sarah flanked him, their hands on his shoulders, while Elena stood nearby, a proud smile on her face. The forest stretched out before them, familiar yet somehow new, full of promise and possibility. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the dual nature within him, human and wolf, in perfect harmony. So Michael said, a hint of his Old humor returning, I guess this means our quiet life in the woods is over, huh? Ethan laughed, the sound full of joy and hope. Maybe he admitted, but I have a feeling our greatest adventure is just beginning. As the sun rose, casting its golden light over the land, the street inn family stood united, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but the story of the Silver Wolf and his extraordinary family was far from over. Chapter 8, New Horizons. The months following Ethan's transformation and the confrontation with the Shapeshifter clan were a whirlwind of activity and change. Word of the Silver Wolf spread like wildfire through the Shapeshifter community, drawing curious visitors and hopeful allies from across the country. The once quiet clearing around the Sterling's cabin became a hub of activity. Shifters of all ages came to see Ethan, to pledge their loyalty or simply to witness the bridge between two worlds that he represented. Michael and Sarah, true to their nature, adapted to their new reality with remarkable grace. Their home became a place of learning and reconciliation where shapeshifters could interact with humans in a safest and controlled environment. Elena, now fully embraced as part of the family, took on the role of ambassador, using her connections and knowledge to smooth relations between different packs and navigate the complex politics of the shapeshifter world. Ethan, for his part, threw himself into his new responsibilities with determination and enthusiasm. He split his time between continuing his education, both human and shapeshifter, and working to implement his vision of a united future. It wasn't always easy. There were setbacks and challenges, moments of doubt and frustration. Some shapeshifters resisted the idea of change, clinging to old prejudices and fears, and there were humans who reacted with fear or hostility when they learned of the existence of shapeshifters in their midst. But through it all, Ethan remained steadfast in his belief that understanding and cooperation were possible. His unique perspective as both human and shapeshifter allowed him to bridge gaps that had seemed insurmountable. One crisp autumn evening, almost a year after his first transformation, Ethan stood on the porch of the cabin watching the sunset over the forest. The silver locket hung around his neck, a constant reminder of the parents who had sacrificed everything to give him this chance. Sarah joined him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. At 13, Ethan was already taller than her, but in that moment she saw flashes of the little boy they had found in the woods all those years ago. Penny, for your thoughts, she asked softly. Ethan smiled, leaning into her embrace. I was just thinking about how much has changed, he said, and how much is still the same. Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. Your father and I are so proud of you, Ethan, the way you've handled everything. It's been extraordinary. I couldn't have done it without you and Dad. Ethan replied, his voice thick with M.O. or Elena or any of the others who've supported us. I may be the Silver Wolf, but it's the strength of our family, all of our family, that's made this possible. As if summoned by his words, Michael and Elena emerged from the house, followed by a group of shapeshifters and humans, the council that had formed to help guide the integration of their two worlds. Are you ready? Michael asked, a proud smile on his face. Ethan took a deep breath and nodded. Today marked a significant milestone, the first official meeting between shapeshifter leaders and human government officials. It was a small step, but an important one on the path to the future Ethan envisioned. As they prepared to leave, a wolf's howl echoed through the forest, not a call of warning or challenge, but one of solidarity and hope. Ethan felt the familiar stirring of his wolf spirit and smiled. Let's go, he said, his voice filled with determination. We have a future to build. As the group made their way through the forest, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. From a baby abandoned in the woods to the Silver Wolf of prophecy, his life had been anything but ordinary. But as he looked at the faces of those around him, his human parents who had raised him with unconditional love, his shapeshifter grandmother who had guided him in his heritage, and the diverse group of humans and shapeshifters who had come together. In pursuit of a common goal, Ethan knew that the most extraordinary part of his story was the family he had found along the way. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges to face, prejudices to overcome, and difficult decisions to make, but Ethan Sterling, the boy who bridged two worlds, was ready to face whatever came next. As they emerged from the forest into a new chapter of their lives, Ethan felt a sense of excitement and possibility. The future was unwritten, full of potential and promise, and together, united in their diversity, they would shape it into something beautiful. The story of the Silver Wolf was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Thank you for watching this real-life story on ZF Story Life. I hope this journey has inspired and resonated with you. Remember, each story has the power to teach us something valuable, and there's so much more to come. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone who could use a little inspiration, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories. Let us know your thoughts or share your own story in the comments below. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and stay inspired with ZF Story Life.